Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. Citizens Bank doing great work all across the state, but here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, they are working hard in the community, and thrilled to have them as a studio sponsor of my show. And I enjoyed catching up with Clay Williams. Man, he's a good dude. I just enjoy visiting with him, and the work that he and their Board of Commissioners is doing at the Gulfport Biloxi Airport is really terrific. And to be up in double digits year over year, it's really terrific to see that. Now let's shift gears and move over to Ashley Edwards, who's the former CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council. He's an entrepreneur. He's a contributing writer to SuperTalk Mississippi News, and most recently, he sat in for Gerard on his show. First time ever, goes to a live show, does 3 straight hours, and didn't miss a lick. I listened to 99.999% of it and was even on the show. And I'm proud of you, Ashley. You did a great job.
Well, thank you, Ricky. I appreciate that. And I have a newfound respect for the fact that what you're doing is tough. This is not an easy gig at all. There are a lot of things to juggle, and it's tough to get the timing down right. So, goodness gracious, people watch your show every day and they think it becomes second nature, but this is a tough gig you've got here.
Well, what happens is, and this is going to happen to you too, if you've got if you're comfortable in your own skin and you do your homework, the homework's important. You got to burn the midnight oil. I don't care what you do. I don't if it's working out with weights or going fishing or having a career. You're going to be good at it if you prepare and you work hard at it. That's and anything worth having, you got to work for. But you do your homework and you don't short shrift any guess, which I never do. In over 900 conversations, I've never winged it. I will never wing it because I really, first of all, I love what I do, and I see this as an opportunity to get to know people better and to get to know issues better. And what happens is, and this will happen with you too, the more you get to do this, is the accumulation of these conversations. Man, I get smarter. Think about over 900 conversations. I get smarter every day, and it enables me to be able to do the twists and turns that inevitably occur. You have a guest, you ask a question, and you expect a good 2-minute answer, and they say, "Yeah, that happened to me once," and that's all they say, and then you're kind of hanging out there. But when you got your monitors and you got your timers going and you got your required things that you got to say, and it's preparation is the key, though. That's true in anything, but it was certainly true in that gig, wasn't it?
It was. And, look, I had a blast. It was a lot of fun to do it. I was so happy that Gerard let me come in and guest host for him, and look forward to doing it again someday.
Well, you're gonna be a natural at it. I'm thrilled for you that you had that opportunity because you're a good thinker. You're a really good thinker, and you came in. I might add, you came in in the midst of the election cycle, which is never easy. Here like about a week out, so to speak, the election cycle, and boy, I mean, it was a tough election cycle. But at the end of the day, Mississippi's a red state, and that's where it landed. But it was good. It was, good. You had a really good sort of balanced view toward it all, and you did a great job of sort of facilitating the conversations that were taking place, and then summing it all up in your conversations with Rhino. So, by the way, I thought your chemistry with Rhino was awesome. You guys did really well together.
Yeah, that was great having Rhino there, a pro that does it every single day, and what an interesting dynamic. But you and I've talked about it before. Talk radio is really an incredible medium, growing in popularity, and as we see forms of traditional media continuing to diminish, this is going to be where it is. So it's a great platform, and SuperTalk's doing a great job. Their election coverage was outstanding. Just gets better and better every day.
Yeah, the election coverage, I've talked about it many times, and you're a former journalist yourself, and, have a tremendous and deep respect for journalism. And as you and I discussed on the show, it's ironic that SuperTalk's known as a conservative station. You know, they've got a lot of conservative programming, but they got a lot of programming that's not conservative either. And but the point is, they got a news operation that is very objective in their coverage. So they're not trying to lean one way or the other. They're just giving you the facts, and they've got a good team led by JT Mitchell, and they're really doing a good job. But when you combine that news operation with Richard Cross, you know, sitting there in that seat, you know, sort of moderating the coverage and having the conversations that they had on election night. It's hard to beat that, man. That was really well done. I mean, and you'll see people can go to the SuperTalk Mississippi Facebook page or to the YouTube page. You'll see various segments that came out of that night. Extraordinarily well done. I mean, you're talking about deep analysis. Just really good stuff, wasn't it?
Well, you know, we've continued to see, and you know this as well as anybody. We've continued to see local media in Mississippi kind of fading away. And so to have a statewide network that can really cover what's going on in real time, talk to the folks that are on the front lines, that's valuable for Mississippians to have available because they don't have those outlets like they want. So,
yeah. Hey, what I would do is, and I say this all the time, but for people who may be coming to the show for the first time, I would really encourage you to go look at supertalk.fm. And do two things while you're there. I mean, you can surf around on that website and you can see the programming, you can see our shows, you can have links to our shows, you can see YouTubes, et cetera. But what I would encourage you to do is go look at the news segment and see the news coverage that's happening across the state. And then sign up for the newsletter. They send out a newsletter, and you can sign up for it. It will prompt you to give you this opportunity to sign up for it. And then once you start getting cued in, the other thing about it, so that's great from an individual point of view, and listeners get just a boatload of news every day that they have the written word, and then they have the audio portion of the news that they share. But it's not just on the 26 radio stations that are part of SuperTalk Mississippi Media. There's another, so many radio stations that make it a total of 51 radio stations that are getting the news across the state. So over 20 radio stations that are not owned by SuperTalk Mississippi Media are actually in the news network. So when you bring that kind of power to the news coverage, to then you add to that the SuperTalk network itself, it's super powerful, like you're saying, and they're getting stronger. While other media are getting weaker, SuperTalk's getting stronger, and I understand why. They've got a great strategy.
No question about it. And, as we continue to go on here, I think you're going to continue to see the dissolution of a lot of legacy local media that has been out there in the state. Funding is difficult. You've seen the rise of the nonprofit newsrooms, and, to have a network like SuperTalk, it's really valuable in terms of Mississippians being able to access up-to-date, accurate information made by Mississippians. So it's a really valuable thing.
Yeah, one day I've talked about it on the show many times, but one day I'll do an entire show to talk about how disillusioned I am with nonprofit news organizations, especially in this state, because there are funders. The funders are typically lean one way or the other politically, and when you look at their 990s, which I have done, that's the requirement that they have to show their funding. They don't necessarily have to list every single organization or every single person that the funding is coming from. Just list that this is the funds. So they are out there pushing statewide officials and others to be transparent and fully disclosed. But when it comes to their own fully disclosed to their own, as a result, and their own disclosure, they're not fully disclosing. So it's something. And as we discussed when I was on your show, they try to tip the scale, and they make no bones about it. They put it all out there for the world to see what their biases are. And I think bias has no place in media. We've seen it in cable, and we see it on social media. It's a shame. It's a shame we can't just get the facts and let people choose for themselves. That's really what it should be about, isn't it?
Well, and I think that most people are reasonable enough if you tell them, look, I'm giving you opinion commentary, I'm giving you editorial commentary, then they take it for what it is. The difficulty is when it's disguised behind hard news. And, that's certainly not, that's certainly not just going on in Mississippi or in nonprofit newsrooms. It has been the trend in national and legacy media over the last generation, which is that the lines between editorial and hard news continue to blur. And, on a station like SuperTalk or on a network of station like SuperTalk, you know when you're listening to an opinion host or a pundit as opposed to you're getting news coverage. And I think that's an important distinction. And keeping that line clear, I think, is what people can respect.
It's a dilemma. I'll mention what I think one of the biggest dilemmas is when we come back after the break, and then we'll find out what else is going on in your world these days. We'll see you after this with Ashley Edwards. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. We're visiting with my friend Ashley Edwards. Ashley, I mentioned before we went to the break that this nonprofit newsroom thing's created a bit of a dilemma. And the dilemma is this, that they're not just an online site anymore. Let's take Mississippi Today, for example. They're providing their content to newspapers across the state, newspapers that claim to be unbiased, news organizations. And now you have this news organization in Mississippi Today that is primarily funded by Democrats that have an agenda. I mean, the bottom line is there's clearly an agenda. They got great reporters, but and some of them I know really well, and I have tremendous respect for them. But that doesn't take away from the fact that at the top there is an agenda, and you have these newspapers and all across the state that are losing resources left and right. There's virtually no reporters left, and so they get this free content from Mississippi Today and they run it, and they don't feel an obligation to look into where is this coming from and who's funding this stuff. Again, you can find fault in all media. I mean, that's just the reality of the deal. But it's still something that is troubling to me as a former publisher. Any comment about that before we shift gears?
Well, I think you're right, Ricky. I mean, I came up obviously not nearly at the level that you did, but in local newspapers. And, I agree with you. I think that we need more good investigative, in-depth reporting in Mississippi and in our regions of our state. I think that's a good thing. Very supportive of it. The difficulty that you run into is when those lines start to get blurred, as we talked about earlier. And so it's, as in all things, the way to achieve, great things in life is to have balance. And so it's, the balance is where is kind of where the secret sauce is. It's the ability for people to hear both sides, to consider factual information without sort of an agenda being driven behind it. And, I think with the elections in Mississippi on Tuesday, it kind of looks like conventional wisdom played out like we thought it would. In reading a lot of the lead up to the election, you may have been led to believe that something quite different was going to happen. And I think it's pragmatic common sense. Tate Reeves won a relatively close race, but he wasn't in real trouble at any point throughout the night. Other Republicans who were facing Democrat challengers that did not have nearly the resources that Brandon Presley had didn't even come close. And so for all intents and purposes, we've now got a state where you've got one competitive race for Democrats. Tate Reeves has now run against arguably the two most well-funded, well-known, well-heeled Democrats to run in Mississippi in a generation, and he's beat them both in relatively close races. But from reading a lot of the coverage in the lead up to the election, you would have believed an upset was brewing. And of course, now we see in retrospect it wasn't. And so, look, no one has a crystal ball. You can't fault people for not being able to predict an outcome that's unknown. But again, I think you're right. Mississippi is a red state, and generally conventional wisdom plays out the way that you think it will in a lot of these situations.
It was interesting because you watch ABC News, CNN, MSNBC. All of their headlines leading up to literally on Election Day was that the governor was mired in a fraud case Well, that's not very accurate at all. I mean, not very accurate at all. I mean, you would think he was near getting indicted the way they were talking about it. And then Mississippi Today did their big, expose a week out. We would have never done that in the world that I came from. We would have never been working so hard to tip the scale journalistically a week out from an election. That's just not the way it works. But so everything was out there, and Mississippi's still a red state at the end of the day, man. Over $12 million, as you pointed out, a good candidate, and Tate Reeves the victor, and across the board, Mississippi's a red state. So that's where we are, man. And I think we could talk all day long, and we won't get into it now. But voter turnout, it just still wasn't as sporty as you would have expected in a race like this. But I think people are so polarized and so tired of the negativity, and they wrote it off. And then, Democrats are usually good at getting the vote out, but they couldn't get the vote out in this case, could they?
I think that's the story of the 2023 elections in Mississippi. Had you seen, significant increases in those counties' turnout west of I-55, where Democrats are still very competitive in Mississippi, it could have been a much tighter race. Brandon Presley may have been able to get it to a runoff, but, he's about 2 points off of where he needs to be. And, there are absentee tallies and things like that still coming in. But in the final accounting, it looks like turnout will actually be down from 2019. And so the postmortem of this election really is all of this advertising, all of this influx of funding didn't really do anything to move the needle, and arguably may have even turned people off and kept them at home. Look, I think it's horrible that we have such low turnout in our elections in Mississippi, but chalk this one up to yet another low turnout election.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, and we've got to do something to get people to be involved in the democratic process. I mean, democracy, my gosh, man, that's what makes America such an amazing place, such an amazing country, and the citizens do take that for granted. That is for sure. They take it for granted. But listen, Ashley, it's been great to catch up with you, my friend. Take care.
Hey, Ricky, thank you for having me, and have a great afternoon.
You bet. This has been my friend Ashley Edwards, a contributor to SuperTalk Mississippi News, and actually a sit-in host from time to time. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.